Hello and welcome to Hi Felicia, formerly known as the Diet Dropout. I am so excited for the shift in energy with the podcast because I felt called to bring you so much more than only talking about nutrition and wellness. Now, don't get me wrong, that subject isn't going anywhere, but I have been energetically called to chat about topics like relationships, mindset, business, money, home, and some real life stuff that you can apply to your very own life now. I am so excited that you are along for the ride as I make this shift and hope you continue to listen because week after week, I will be sharing so much more about my own life as well as bringing you epic guests that will inspire and motivate you. Now remember, it is okay to pivot and it's okay to change the direction of your life. I want to empower you to leave room for magic as we continue to embark on this journey called life. Are you with me? I'm so excited to be doing this with you. No, bye Felicia here. Welcome to Hi Felicia. Thank you for tuning in. Hello, happy Friday. Before we get into the episode, I want to make sure to give Heather a really, really good intro. Heather McConaughey, she was on the podcast. Actually, it was Diet Dropout when she recorded it, but now I've rebranded and it's Hi Felicia. And I was so excited to have her on. She empowers successful women to lose weight and keep it off in a sustainable, life-changing way. She's driven by her own weight loss struggles and being sick and tired of not seeing the results. Now it's Heather's mission to empower busy and successful women to lose weight and feel great again. We literally talk about so much. We talk about fertility. We talk about my own fertility struggles. She also has a podcast called the 84ed5c75c4a74f65abae4b7b42467862 podcast and basically just how to optimize your period and ovulation and all the things with simple nutrition and lifestyle changes. And we also tap into a little bit about preventative and healing diabetes type 2 with nutrition as well. So hope you all enjoy the episode. Also, if you text me at 480-530-5459, that's 480-530-5459, you will get on my community where you will have access to me. Like I literally can text you. And every week I send out a weekly workout. I send out inspirational tips, quotes, all the things. So I love communicating with my community. And so if you want an easier way to communicate with me or ask me questions, text that number and you will have access to me and every week a weekly workout. So again, that's 480-530-5459. All right, let's go ahead and get into this episode. Welcome, Heather. I am so excited to have you here on the podcast. Thank you so much. And for those that don't know, I was just on Heather's podcast yesterday, the Positive Thread podcast, which I can't wait for that episode. Heather, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited. I feel like we just hit it off yesterday and I could have just talked with you for hours. So excited to have you now. And I just recently did a little rebrand on my podcast. So I did, before it was the Diet Dropout, which I've loved. It was literally my baby. It started at 2.5 years ago. And I don't know about you, and I would love to know, but like I felt this itch to just pivot and rebrand, like this new energy and just this feeling. Like, can you relate with that?
Oh yeah, 100%. I've actually thought of rebranding my podcast a few times, and I'm actually keeping the name of my podcast, but I am rebranding like my cover art. Right. Yes. So I totally relate.
I will tell you, it is so fun. It brings like a whole new energy. But yeah, I even changed the name. And, I love the Diet Dropout, but it was tough because I was getting pitched a lot of just, health, nutrition, all of that, which is great. And I love talking about that. That's not going anywhere. But I wanted to be open and have the permission to be able to talk about relationships and humor and just funny things that people can relate to. So I'm so excited. So when you decide to change the brand and everything like that, you're going to have so much fun with it because it's such a fun process.
Well, and I think it just points to that as women, we are so expansive and we have so many dimensions to us and we're multi-passionate, we're interested in things and we don't want to just talk about one thing all the time. I think that's almost like a masculine energy to be.
I agree. I totally agree. And, being okay to explore those other things. And I love that. Thank you so much. So for those that may not know, maybe give a bit of background. We're going to dig into some amazing things today. And actually, this is a really popular topic because we're going to talk about menstrual cycle and women's hormones and things like that. And such a popular topic because I know that my audience, some of the podcasts that I have talked about this have been some of the best. And so as far as like viewers and things or listeners and things like that. So, but give the audience a little background into you.
Sure. So I'm a former registered nurse turned nutritionist. I was a registered nurse for 5 years before I started my business and coaching others in nutrition. And I was specifically an emergency room nurse for 3 years at a busy level 1 trauma center. So I saw everything from heart attacks to, amputations to traumatic brain injury, stroke, diabetes, et cetera, et cetera. And I also, during that time, was going through my own health and fitness journey. I got super into CrossFit. I got super into nutrition. I was struggling with my own body to kind of understand the best way to eat to get results. And long story short, I got certified in nutrition, got results for my body. People at my gym saw my results, and I started coaching people in nutrition at my gym. Mm-hmm. And then it just grew. And within 6 months of starting my business, I left nursing completely and was full-time. And I've been full-time as a nutritionist for over 3.5 years.
Oh, that's amazing. And I love this topic that we're going to talk about now. Do you find that now we're going to talk about how to optimize your period, but I feel like a lot of women are still, they don't really understand their bodies. So, you could have a woman, and I'm just going to speak from experience, not get their period for a couple of years when I was a competitor. And I remember going to my doctor and I remember him asking me specifically, well, do you plan on having any kids, anytime soon? I said, no. He's like, okay, well, don't worry about it. And it was just like this thing. And, we, as women, I think sometimes we just, we take what we hear from our doctors, even though we know deep inside there might be something going on in our bodies. So in terms of period, where can we start in terms of just, optimizing your period and how we do that naturally through lifestyle?
Yeah, love this topic. Okay, so one of the most important skills is so basic, but I've discovered a lot of women don't know how to do it, which is just how to count your period. Yeah. And know which day of your cycle you're in. So the first day that you bleed is day 1 of your cycle.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, I did not know that. So I thought like day 1 was like when your period was over and the day after was day 1.
Great. Yeah. So no, that's incorrect. So and a lot of women think that, right? So day 1 of your period is obviously the first day you bleed, but day 1 of your entire menstrual cycle is the first day that you bleed. So you always want to be counting from that point forward. Mm-hmm. When you start counting your period correctly, you will start to understand then the different phases, which we can talk about, and then where you're at in your cycle because you know your cycle day. Mm-hmm. So if you are on day 14, and you have roughly a 28-day cycle, you're ovulating.
Mm-hmm. And what do you feel anything when you're ovulating? Like, is it like very noticeable? Because I will be completely honest, I talked about this on the podcast as well. And this is something that my partner and I have been struggling with, but we just thought that it would happen naturally, and we're not doing anything to be preventative, but it's been a couple of years now and nothing. And we do want to go down the route of fertility. We're going to have to seek other options, but I remember Googling, like, how do you know if you're ovulating? Like, what's happening? So what are some of the symptoms or if any, to know if you are ovulating?
Yeah, great question. So one thing I just want to back up and share really quick is we tend to think that we're fertile, for more of the time than we are. You can actually only get pregnant 6 days of your cycle.
Interesting. Okay. I'm going to write this down.
There's only 6 days. Yeah. And if you get pregnant from this podcast, I want to know, okay? You can name the baby Heather. But okay. So there's really only 6 days where you're fertile in your cycle. This is because sperm can live in the woman's bodies for 5 days.
Okay.
So if you and your partner have sex on day 10 of your cycle, and you don't ovulate until 4 days later, you can still get pregnant because the sperm can live for 5 days.
Okay.
Your egg, though, can only live for 24 hours. So once the egg drops, it's got 24 hours to be fertilized or it's done.
Okay.
So you have a 6-day fertile window in your cycle. And what happens is sometimes people like they have sex too late. So they've missed the window. It will increase your chances of getting pregnant if you're having sex prior to ovulation because the sperm lasts 5 days. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Okay, cool.
So some signs of ovulation. Well, one, you will tend to have more discharge and your discharge will kind of thicken. It can become almost like egg white texture. You may kind of notice this, like, as you wipe yourself after the bathroom or whatever. That's a sign that you're, approaching ovulation. Another sign is like increased sex drive, right? So you actually do have a small testosterone bump when you ovulate. So if you notice that you're feeling like more sexual or
a little bit more frisky,
like
that's when I'm like sending my guy like photos like, hey, get home. Yes.
Then that could be a good sign. But again, if you're ovulating that day, it would have been better to have sex a few days in advance, right?
Right.
So there's another thing you can use called LH strips, which you can just buy over the counter at the pharmacy. These are luteinizing hormone strips, and you pee on them and they show a spike in LH. And this can be very helpful to predict your ovulation and show when you're most fertile. Another tool is I use the Natural Cycles app. Have you ever heard of that app?
I haven't. I use an app called Flow.
Okay. Here's why I like Flow just for tracking, but I find Natural Cycles to be very powerful. It's actually approved by the FDA and the European Union for like preventing pregnancy because it uses a very advanced algorithm based on your daily temperature that you take.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So your body temperature actually spikes almost a full degree after you ovulate. A lot of women don't realize that.
Did not know that.
So our bodies are so amazing, right?
Yeah.
And this has to do from the progesterone, your body temp will rise from that. So you take your temperature every day with this special thermometer. It has to be the thermometer they send you because it's highly accurate to 2 decimal places. You log that in the app in your phone. And after a few cycles, it will be able to predict your ovulation very accurately. And you can tell the app, prevent pregnancy, and then it'll be like, don't have sex these days or make sure you use backup protection. Or if you're trying to get pregnant, it'll be like, it's go time.
Yes. Oh man. Okay. So the Natural Cycle app. Amazing. Okay. I have heard of that though, like your temperature, increasing around those times as well. So I know, and again, I can only speak from personal experience and just, conversations that I've had with my clients, but like for me, as I've gotten older, I feel like my PMS symptoms have gotten worse. Like the period cramps and the PMS, like the mood, like literally my mood shifts so drastically. And I even looked into this. Like I actually just right before here, I took this quiz on like hormones and like your period. And it was just because I think as women, we're curious and we're like, why is this happening? Like, I feel like a different person. And I feel like my hormones have shifted and this has maybe gotten worse or eased off as I've aged. So what is happening with that? And how can we optimize those symptoms that we might be feeling? And is it normal? Is it normal to be like that drastic, maybe really heavy flows, heavy cramping, and like major mood swings?
Yeah, it's so challenging being a woman sometimes. It's like, why do I have to deal with this? Like, I just had my period like 10 days ago, and I was so sad. Like, for the first 3 days, I was crying. Felt really depressed. I was like, what is happening to me again?
I know. And you know what's so funny? My business partner and I, Annette Della Rosa, we're launching a mastermind. No joke. We planned our launch around our cycle.
So smart. That's
so we launched a week ago. We opened up the wait list and we're into that. We both, and also too, for whatever reason, we don't live together or anything like that, but for whatever reason, our cycles have decided to match up. And so like we get our periods a couple days apart and it's pretty random. So yeah, so we've been able to plan our launches and just being online and being like high energy around our periods. So it's pretty crazy.
That's so funny you mentioned that because one of my best friends, Ashlyn, she lives in Los Angeles. I'm in Texas, and we have also synced like over. I'm like, okay, this is
I know. So weird. So weird. But it's awesome because we can plan our launches around it. And we're like, okay, we're definitely not starting the beginning of the launch right at the start of our period or right before our period. So yeah, so crazy. But yeah, so what is happening there? Like why, like even in my case, and let's say there's a woman right now who is struggling with like the PMS and the mood and all of that maybe has gotten worse as we've gotten older. What could that be a sign of, and how can we optimize those areas of our life?
So I think one of the most important things to get is data on our bodies. And this is something that I've learned in my whole process with hormones. So I actually had an ovarian cyst like 3 years ago. And my symptom was I had like a period that just didn't end. It was like a 3-week period. I was like, what's going on? So I went to my OB and they found this cyst and they actually operated on me and they took it out. But it put me on this journey of learning about my hormones. And so I've read a lot and learned a lot. And I think one of the most important things is to get data on our bodies. So a lot of women are just in the dark about where they're at. And one of the most powerful tests you can do is a Dutch test, which is a dried urine test for comprehensive hormones. It's not a cheap test. Most places it'll be $300 to $500. You pee on these pieces of paper over a period of time, which is great, showing your pattern with your hormones as opposed to just like a random blood test. And a lot of providers like your normal OBGYN or your PCP, they won't know about this test. They won't order it. Insurance won't cover it, unfortunately. Okay. But if you can pay out of pocket for one and get a consult with somebody like a functional health doctor, it will reveal so much to you. So I would recommend you get a Dutch test because you're trying to get pregnant. You're hitting some roadblocks. You're also having bad PMS. Those are all like little warnings to me that like something is imbalanced with your hormones that could be optimized.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And we know, right? Like intuitively, we know that something is off. And so I'm guessing that maybe I'm not producing enough progesterone or something along those lines is kind of my guess. But yeah, I have heard of the Dutch test, and I've talked to many functional doctors on here and naturopaths, and that's a test that they've brought up quite often was the Dutch test. So yeah, I'll have to do something like that for sure.
Yeah, and I can recommend a couple people who do them. Carrie Cootie does them. She's on Instagram. Okay. She's actually a women's integrative PharmD. So she's a pharmacist who's gotten certified in doing Dutches and reading them. Yeah. And then Nutrition Dynamic is who I do mine through. And then you can meet with like one of their dietitians and they'll talk about supplementation protocols. But like when I did my Dutch test, all my sex hormones were really good because I'm 40. And I also want to conceive naturally, and if I can. And so I'm really working on optimizing everything right now. And so like, it'll just be like a peace of mind to be like, oh, actually all my hormones are normal. Like maybe it's the guy, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, for sure. And it's a peace of mind. And you say optimize, like, what are some things that we can do to just like optimize our hormones? And I know that period, obviously all of that is integrated. Like what are some things, and lifestyle, obviously the lifestyle changes that we can make that women can just start implementing right now to just optimize that part of themselves?
So one of the number one most important things is eliminating things that are impeding your toxic pathways that need to be cleared, because your body has to clear estrogen through your liver. And there's so many like xenoestrogens in our environment now, like chemicals that mimic estrogen. And then we are overloading our liver with things like alcohol, caffeine, and sugar, right? Which all get processed through the liver as well. Fructose gets processed through the liver. And so we need to understand that sometimes it's not about adding things, it's about taking things away. Women, a lot of women are super high stress, right? Like we're entrepreneurial or we're working and juggling kids, and the female body does not respond to stress.
Yes. Yeah.
Your body to carry like a child, like it does not want to be threatened or like,
let's think about that for a little bit too. Like and this is the conversation we had yesterday on your podcast, right? Like
if you think about like our bodies and especially like women who are like overachievers, high level, just, high stress, have a lot going on in their life, but they're also battling, wanting to be thin and wanting to, be in shape and look a certain way, that they are probably under eating and over exercising. And so like when we do that to our bodies, and yes, right now, if you're listening to this and this is you are causing more stress in your body in the form of cortisol, which is going to slow down or mitigate any sort of results that you are searching for, because you're already in a stress state. You're already now, your body's holding on to body fat. So then we top that with under eating and over exercising. It's going to do the opposite, right? So yeah. And do you find that a lot with your clients as well?
Yeah, I feel like everybody's dealing with stress. And when I did the Dutch test, my cortisol was too high. Like it's too high in the evening and it's too high in the morning, which means it's too high all night. And I have trouble sleeping. So like another simple thing you can do to reduce stress is drink chamomile tea in the morning. So I think a lot of people think about drinking it in the evening to wind down, but I have been prescribed to drink chamomile in the morning to help bring cortisol down, which is a great thing you can do. Another thing you can do is, like you just mentioned, instead of training more with your exercise or doing more intense exercise as a woman, move your body daily, but focus more on walking and yoga. Walking will burn fat because it's low intensity, steady state cardio, right? You burn a higher percentage of calories during doing lifts that are from fat, but then you get the reduced cortisol from walking. And actually the calorie burn between walking and running is not that different. I read something where it was like 115 calories versus 90 for it's like,
well, I call it the most underrated form of movement is walking, like so underrated. I think it's just the most simplest thing that you can do for yourself.
So anything where you can reduce stress on your body is going to help. Caffeine, remember, is a sympathetic nervous system stimulant. We actually have IV caffeine in the emergency room to use for like emergencies. It's used on infants who are like in respiratory distress because it is that nervous system stimulant that causes adrenaline to flood your body. It constricts your blood vessels. It increases your heart rate. Well, those are all signs. Your body does all those things also when it's being chased by a tiger.
Can I be completely honest? Oh my gosh. One of the things that I think why I haven't like taken the Dutch test or like met with a naturopath or anything like that, just in the last, I would say year, is because I know that they're going to tell me, Felicia, you need to stop drinking coffee. And I'm addicted. I always pride myself. I'm good. Like I don't get addicted to things. Like I'm not, I can say no. Like I never have been addicted to drugs or anything like that. Like I don't get addicted to things. I can pretty much like slough things off. But like I gave up coffee because I went to this seminar where basically, he gave me they basically talked about all this information about caffeine and it being one of the most addictive drugs. And they referred to it as a drug. And it really got me thinking. So I was like, okay, let me just stop, and I remember it was a Tuesday that I stopped. And by the following Tuesday, I was driving to Starbucks. Like I was making my coffee here at home. Heather, that is a real thing that really affected me. And now I'm afraid that I'm not going to be able to come off of it. So that's one of the reasons why I think I haven't gotten the Dutch test, because I know that is one of the first things they'll tell me.
I completely relate to this. I am also a caffeine addict. My caffeine addiction is so bad. I attend Caffeine Addicts Anonymous meetings.
Oh my goodness. I didn't even realize there was like something like that.
Yes, I have struggled for probably 13 years to quit caffeine, and I would have periods of time. Like it's definitely gotten better over the past 2 years. I've reduced it, but I was still struggling. And I even fell off the wagon a couple weeks ago. Like it's literally a drug. And so don't be ashamed about that, but do recognize that that could definitely be impacting you negatively, like fertility wise. And it's the most socially acceptable drug, like in our culture. I feel like it's like even more so than like food now. Like,
it's crazy. It's so crazy. And the seminar was pretty fascinating. I went to this like high level, like entrepreneur seminar, and the seminar actually was very informative, but it was actually about microdosing. And I don't know if you know anything about that, but it was just a seminar that just, talked to these high level, entrepreneurs about using microdosing to just help unlock, gateways and all of those things. Nope. They were not handing out microdosing after the seminar or anything like that. It was just education, just learning about it. But part of that seminar, they touched upon caffeine and like what it does to our brain and parasympathetic. And I'm like, wow, this is a drug. And it gives you this false sense of false sense of energy, false sense of inspiration, false sense of like getting things done. And it really prompted me to want to stop, only to get right back on a week later. So it's been tough. Yes.
Yeah, you're not alone. That's why I'm in these Caffeine Addicts Anonymous.
I can't believe literally like that. What are some of the so for these people who are in this, it's kind of, I would say kind of like Alcoholics Anonymous. Is that kind of the same sort of thing? You're going there and you talk about like what you're struggling with or why you need caffeine. Like what kind of conversations are you having in there? If you can share. No.
Yeah, of course. Like kind of like any 12-step program, it's really rooted in like spiritual truths. So it's kind of admitting like I'm powerless over this substance.
Yes.
You may have already experienced, right? Like I know I have. I will get cravings. I will have obsessive thoughts. I will even be like, I'll get a decaf instead, and I'll be on decaf for a few days, and then I'll progress to half calf, and then I'll be back on full calf. So the meetings are really about kind of working the 12 steps. But the biggest thing that I've taken away from my journey with caffeine is I personally, and this is not everybody, I personally use caffeine to avoid dealing with negative emotions. It could be, I don't need the energy. It could be like, I'm bored. It could be I'm lonely. It could be I'm uninspired. It could be I'm sad. It could be and I'll also use it to elevate. So if I'm actually feeling really good, I'll be like, let's get a coffee. This is let's make it even better.
Yeah, that's so funny you say that. Cause like my fiance will come home. He's like, hey, do you want to go get it's like, you want to go get a coffee? And we don't really need it. Right. And so I often ponder, do I need caffeine for energy? And I feel like I am energetic and I actually don't have any problem falling asleep at night. I get really good sleep. But for me, it's part of my routine. I look forward to it in the morning. It's part of what I look forward to, and it makes me feel good. And so one thing that I've been, toying with is maybe even, and I got this actually from a podcast. Who was I listening to? Oh, Joe Rogan, and Michael Pollan was on. I actually have his book here, In the Defense of Food. And he talks a lot about plants and plant medicine and all the things. And he talked about caffeine, it being a highly addictive drug. And he suggested that if you are having trouble, treating something like that, as we have these rituals, right? So let's say we take alcohol, for instance, alcohol, there are these underlining rules around alcohol, right? We drink at night. We're not necessarily getting up and drinking in the morning. Maybe at social function. Yeah, hopefully those listening now, you're not doing that, but you have it in the evening with dinner. You have it at a social function. There's all these rituals that we have around drinking alcohol, and if you stick within those rituals, then you're probably going to have a pretty good relationship with it. Now, same thing with caffeine. So what if we just treated it like a ritual? Sunday morning, sitting down, having coffee and reading a book, versus this dependency every single day, or you can't get your day started without it, right? Or a ritual when you're in this, let's say you're in Italy, for instance, you're like, oh, I really want to have this espresso because I'm experiencing this. I'm in Italy. This is fun, you're obviously going to eat the pasta when you're there. And so it's creating rituals around things that you might find yourself dependent on. And those rituals are not necessarily a codependency, but just this thing that you do that allows you to not have to depend on it every single day. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. And look, I'm not saying everyone needs to quit caffeine. I don't think everyone is quote unquote an addict, but as I've struggled to quit it, it's kind of made me more aware that oh, for me, this is actually an addiction. I'm not addicted to alcohol. I had no problem quitting drink. I don't drink anymore, but I wasn't an alcoholic. I just decided I don't like drinking.
Right.
Another thing that's helped me with the caffeine, going back to ritual, is I make a taquino latte or ticino. Have you heard of the ticino?
Is it like tea and coffee?
Like coffee substitute. Yeah. And I love it. And I brew. So my ritual is like, I wake up and I make like lemon ginger tea, my chamomile tea, and I drink that before my morning walk, but I'll brew the ticino and let it sit, and then it cools, and I make like a short amount. And then I make an iced latte with like vegan creamer, So now I have this ritual around something non-caffeinated, and that has really helped me still enjoy like the creamy morning.
Yeah. I love that. That is so fantastic. So this is actually really great for those that are listening right now that are struggling with a habit, right? So, or starting a habit. It's creating this ritual around it that makes you feel good. So especially if you are struggling with, let's say food, for instance, and you just hit it on the head, like you're able to do it because it gives you satiety, like like you're satisfied, right? Because you have that creamer and it's just something. So a lot of times when people are doing any sort of, new quote unquote, like meal plan or diet, obviously I'm not a fan of those names, but you're eating food that you don't enjoy and it's not satisfying you. And again, that's another reason why we may go the opposite direction of like the binge eating and the overeating and then giving up on the diet, because you're just not feeling satisfied, or you haven't found a way to create satisfaction around the things that you're eating. And you just said it right there. You were able to find a solution, an alternative to something that you've been struggling with that actually fits that need that you want, that satisfaction. And for me, I think it's just morning routine that I like to just sip on the coffee through the morning. So that's a great idea. I love that. So maybe I'll replace it with a chamomile. And I love my oat milk, and maybe even throw a little bit of the collagen bone broth into there and like blend it and maybe pour it over ice. That would be really good.
Oh my gosh.
You got me going now. Like I'm going to do this and I'm going to let you know how it goes.
Perfect.
Amazing. Okay. So moving on. So, talking about periods. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is ovulation. So like, so let's say you are a woman and you don't want to get pregnant. Now, why do you think the doctor told me, hey, Felicia, you're not, having a period, but you don't want to get pregnant? Okay, well, don't even worry about it. Do you disagree with that? Like, do you think that women should be having their period each month?
Yes, most definitely.
Yeah.
If you're not having a period, that means that you're not ovulating.
Yeah. And so what are the reasons why, and those listening now, women who are not ovulating, what could be going on in their life? Why would they not be ovulating?
Well, one could be their body fat is too low, right? So you see this you even mentioned it, like competitive athletes. You can just not have enough body fat on your body. I've actually kind of saw a few like fitness influencers that I followed online who I always was like, wow, they're really lean, right? And then like struggle with fertility issues. So I think we need to reshape this conversation of like how much fat is good for our bodies. Like I'm a healthy weight. I'm 5'4" and I'm 122 pounds. Like I'm very healthy, but I have 5 fat. I've got some cellulite. I've got, I'm probably like 23, maybe 20. Yeah, probably 23% body fat, roughly somewhere in there. That's a healthy body fat percentage. Like, yeah, I would look super ripped if I was 18, 19% body fat, but like, what's the cost? Is that going to cost me my fertility? So I think one is making sure you're not under fueling your body and getting too lean. The flip side though, is if you become obese, that can also disrupt your hormones and cause issues with fertility. So it's about being a healthy weight for your size. Stress could cause you to not ovulate, disruptions to your sex hormones, endocrine disruptors, like we talked about, the xenoestrogens, plastics, toxins, things like that. But that's where getting a full hormone panel makes a difference. I had a client actually who's my age. She and I went to high school together actually, and she struggled to lose weight working with me. And I just had a feeling it was hormonal. And she eventually got a hormone test done after we worked together. And she's like, I'm actually in perimenopause, and she was 40.
Oh, wow.
So that's why, again, I go back to get data, like do touch, and then at least okay, all my sex hormones are good. Or if they're not, then like, what can I do to boost them?
Yes, data is good. If you feel like something is going on with your body, being just proactive about your health is going to be the answer for you. I love that. So good. One of the topic that I wanted to talk about a little bit while we have a little bit of time here is diabetes. I feel like type 2 diabetes especially is on the rise. obviously, you see this, you talked about sugar earlier today, in addition to the caffeine. So how do we prevent type 2 diabetes? How do we heal it? But first off, like, how do we prevent going down that road or even becoming pre-diabetic?
Wow, it's so challenging in our society. I mean, working as an ER nurse, I saw so many diabetic patients.
Mhm.
I saw, type 2 diabetics. I saw type 1, which they can't control. That's like a autoimmune issue. But it's a very like destructive disease. I had a patient once who was type 2 diabetic who hadn't been taking care of his body, and his foot had literally rotted.
Oh
And
my goodness.
the doctor came in and was like, yeah, we're cutting that off. Like, he took one look at it and it was just like, you have to have an amputation. So I think people forget that the choices they're making with their food today have like far reaching implications for their health in the future.
Mhm.
I think having worked as an ER nurse and seen so many of these like traumatic, scary things, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to eat my vegetables today. No problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is such a tough topic too, right? Because like, I've been kind of diving into, I watched this IG live recently. I forgot who, her name's Autumn. She's Autumn Calabrese. She's one of the head trainers for Beachbody, and she got on and she just kind of was chatting about, anti-diet but pro-health, and how this body positive movement can kind of get pushed in the wrong, what she feels is, being pushed in the wrong direction in terms of like really kind of disregarding health for the sake of body positivity. Now, I want to preface this by saying that I absolutely think it's not right at all to comment on people's body, whether you're thin, whether you're, overweight, whatever it may be, wherever you fall on the spectrum. It's absolutely not okay to comment on people's bodies, right? And we'll just say that right now. But also, I feel like with, what's happening with this self-love and the body positive movement, which I think is fantastic, I also feel it's shaming those who are pro-health and shaming those who might say like, well, we do have to eat these foods that are going to, just let go of the fact of like what these foods are going to make us look like. Like, how are these foods going to make us feel? And can that be our focus? And that's been a challenge for me, even in my industry, and obviously your industry as well. And, because we're similar in like not offending people, and also knowing privilege and, what access, food that people have access to and all of the things. It's like, you have to be so cognizant of what you're saying. But I am absolutely pro-health because I know what it's like to not feel good in your skin and in your mind. And a lot of that is food related. The lifestyle can completely transform that part, right? And even like down type 2 diabetes, like it can be cured with a lifestyle change. And so like, how do you even approach that in what you do?
Yeah, so I've worked with a few clients who are type 2 diabetic. And one of the things is we're not necessarily always going to completely cure diabetes once it's in process. It's really about managing and improving different markers. So we have a marker called hemoglobin A1C, which is a marker for diabetes. And when we see that elevated, that is a sign that your diabetes is out of control. And both type 1 and type 2 diabetics get that tested. So we want to control that. So I actually had a client where I had all his labs before working together, and then we did labs after to really measure, did what we do helped, because he actually was not overweight. Genetically, he was Hispanic and he was more predisposed to diabetes, just because genetically people of African-American descent, Pacific Islanders, and people of Hispanic descent are more at risk for developing diabetes. Now, he was actually a normal weight, but we saw his blood work change just through nutrition. And what we really focused on, because weight loss wasn't the primary driver of his diabetes, it was like carb sources. We changed things. So instead of potato chips, I would have him eat like nuts for like a snack. Instead of like white flour products, it would be like, let's have some quinoa. So changing the carb quality source from high glycemic carbs to low glycemic is one of the best ways that you can improve type 2 diabetes. Also, there are two things that improve insulin sensitivity in all people, but diabetics, the first is to lose weight. So anything that helps your body lose weight will improve insulin sensitivity. And the second thing is exercise, which will increase the number of GLUT4 receptors that you have within your cell, which are actually the channels that come out of the vesicles in the cell, and they merge into the cell wall. Insulin unlocks the cell, sugar flows in. The more you exercise, the higher you are trained. You will have more GLUT4 receptors.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting. Okay. So that's awesome that, it's not always how, we look. Obviously, our bodies are not a predicator of health. That's why, again, data is so important to figure out what is going on inside of your body, especially if you're just not feeling great or you know that something's off intuitively. And so trust that. Amazing. So you have your podcast, the Positive Thread podcast. Talk to me a little bit about that. Like what kind of guests do you have on? How long have you been doing it? I would love to know more about your podcast.
Yes. So the Positive Thread podcast is really designed to empower the millennial woman in body, mind, and soul. Mm-hmm. I'm passionate about helping women holistically. Mm-hmm. I started it in the winter of 2018, right after I'd started my business. And I really just wanted to share my thoughts, right?
Yeah.
I actually did a really cool seminar recently. It's called a giftedness seminar, and it's based off a book called The Person Called You. And you learn what your inherent gift is that you were born with. And my gift is I use my voice to illuminate the truth, freeing others from the darkness. And I literally see it all over my life, and in the smallest things and the biggest things. And I realize my podcast is just an expression of my gift. I just want to share truth with people. And so I have guests like you, other amazing health coaches and people committed to wellness, but I also interview people who are style gurus, and I have money mindset people on. I have mindset coaches. I also talk to my clients. I recently interviewed the zero waste chef who's committed to sustainability. So amazing. I love just interviewing guests and sharing content that really just empowers women.
I love that. So good. Make sure you tune in. I am so happy that I had a chance to be on that podcast as well. Now, where can people find you? Do you have anything going on right now where people can, work with you or get something, maybe a freebie or something that you have that you can let the audience know?
Yes. So the best place to connect with me is on Instagram, just at Heather McConaughey. If you just type in Heather MCC, I'll pop up. Okay. Also, my website, heathermcconaughey.com. And if you go to my website, you can download a freebie. I have a really great guide that's a holistic body, mind, and soul guide for you. It's completely free, so you can download that as well.
Amazing. Well, I'll make sure to have all of that in the show notes so you can check her out and follow her. Thank you, Heather. You've been amazing. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you rate and review. It helps the podcast be seen and heard. And make sure to give Heather a follow. Okay, see you next week. Bye. Yay, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed that episode. And per usual, make sure you subscribe. You're going to get notified each week as soon as I drop a new episode. And if you haven't, I would so appreciate if you could review this podcast. It helps the podcast be seen and heard. It takes a couple of seconds. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I will see you next week. Bye.